Your favorite song, it just sounds like noise. That comfort food you always go to tastes like cardboard. You're surrounded by people you love, but you feel, well, nothing. If any of that sounds familiar, listen up. You're not lazy and you're not ungrateful. You might be experiencing something called anhedonia. So in this explainer, we're going to break down exactly why nothing feels good anymore, dig into the brain science behind this emotional numbness, and most importantly, lay out a practical, action-based path to help you reclaim your joy. This is the feeling so many people describe. It's this deep sense of disconnection. You're there, you're going through the motions, but it's like the color and the vibrancy of life just can't get through to you. It is so frustrating and so isolating. But I want to be really clear about this. It is not a personal failing. It's a biological state. Your brain's reward system has basically gone into power-saving mode, and we're about to find out exactly why.
So what is this feeling of nothing? In this first part, we are going to demystify this emotional numbness. We're going to give it a proper name, and we're going to separate it from what it's not. Because honestly, getting a clear picture of the problem is always the first step toward finding the right solution.
The official term is anhedonia. It was actually coined way back in 1896, and it literally means without pleasure. Now, this isn't about feeling sad, it's the absence of joy. And it usually shows up in one of two ways. Social anhedonia, where hanging out with people feels draining instead of fun, and physical anhedonia, where things like food, music, or even touch just lose their appeal entirely. Okay, this slide shows a really, really important distinction. Now, anhedonia is a major symptom of depression, for sure, but you can have it without that overwhelming sadness that we usually associate with depression. Think of it this way. Sadness is an active feeling, right? It's a feeling of pain. Anhedonia is a void. It's an empty space where the good feelings are supposed to be. And knowing that difference is absolutely key.
So here's the bottom line, and I really want this to sink in. Anhedonia is not a character flaw. It's a neurobiological state. Your brain isn't failing you, it's actually trying to protect you. It's like an emergency protocol for when your system gets totally overwhelmed. It's just shifting all its resources to survival, and that means putting pleasure on the back burner for a while.
All right, so let's dig into the mechanics of this so-called emergency protocol. What is actually happening inside your brain to cause this silence? We're going to get into the science of it, and it all starts with your body's central stress response system. Okay, I know this chart looks a little complex, but the takeaway is actually really simple and really powerful. Research from Dr. Robert Sapolsky at Stanford shows that when you're under chronic stress, your system gets flooded with stress hormones like cortisol. And we're not talking about a temporary dip. When cortisol levels are high for a long time, they physically damage your dopamine system. They reduce how much dopamine you can make, they dull the receptors that are supposed to detect it, and they can even become toxic to the brain cells themselves. Basically, chronic stress systematically dismantles the machinery of pleasure in your brain. And if you remember our explainer on trauma, you'll recognize this system. It's the HPA axis, your body's command center for stress. When that system is constantly activated, it just prioritizes survival above all else. It pulls energy away from things like joy and reward to manage what it thinks is a constant threat. And that's what leads to the fatigue, the brain fog, and the anhedonia. It's the same system, just a different symptom. And here's another huge piece of the puzzle in our modern world. Dr. Anna Lemke calls this the dopamine deficit state. See, our world is just overflowing with these cheap, high-potency dopamine hits, social media, junk food, you name it. They give us this huge spike, but the crash that follows is just as big. And over time, your brain tries to protect itself by getting rid of its own dopamine receptors. You build up a tolerance, and pretty soon, the simple, earned pleasures of life, they just don't even register anymore.
Now, I know that all sounds pretty bleak, but here's the good news. Your brain can change. It's plastic. It can be retrained. And in this next section, we're going to look at two real-world stories of a slow reboot, two totally different paths to recovery that show exactly how this process works in the real world. So meet Rachel. She went on an antidepressant for anxiety, and it worked for the anxiety, but it also turned the volume down on everything else in her life. The joy, the excitement, the pleasure, it was all just gone. And what's so important here is that her recovery didn't just happen overnight after she stopped the medication. It was a slow, gradual 10-month process of her brain chemistry recalibrating itself. Her big breakthrough came from a type of therapy called behavioral activation. And the main idea here is that you cannot wait to feel motivated to do something. You have to act first, almost mechanically, with absolutely zero expectation of enjoyment, just to get those motivational circuits firing again.
For Rachel, this was the key that unlocked everything and rebooted her reward system. And then we have David. He started experiencing anhedonia after he quit a long-term daily cannabis habit. Now look at this timeline. The absolute hardest part for him was between weeks 4 and 8. That's what Dr. Lemke would call that deep dopamine deficit state. Everything felt gray, everything felt pointless, and this is the exact period where most people relapse because they think, well, this isn't working. But David just kept going. He pushed through. And that is the crucial lesson from his story. That really tough withdrawal phase, that feeling that things are actually getting worse, not better, is so often the darkness right before the dawn. It's the sign that your brain is finally beginning this slow, hard work of resetting its own baseline.
So, inspired by these stories and grounded in all this science, what can we actually do about it? This section is all about the action-based toolkit. These are evidence-based protocols that you can use to manually restart your own reward system.
Here they are. We've got 7 core protocols: a dopamine detox, behavioral activation, non-negotiable exercise, cold exposure, seeking out novel experiences, something called savoring meditation, and a modified gratitude practice. These aren't about thinking positive. No. These are physical and behavioral actions designed to force your brain to start rebuilding its reward pathways from the ground up.
Let's start with behavioral activation. The rule here is so simple, just 15 minutes. Pick something you used to enjoy, playing an instrument, drawing, reading, anything, and just do it for 15 minutes. Don't ask yourself if you feel like it, don't judge whether or not you're enjoying it, just do the action. All you're doing is laying down the tracks for the feeling to eventually follow.
Okay, this next one might sound a little strange, but stick with me. A 30-second blast of cold water at the end of your shower intentionally presses on the pain side of your brain's pleasure-pain balance. To compensate for that, your brain then rebounds by releasing dopamine. Over time, this can actually help reset your baseline capacity for pleasure. It's a small, controlled stressor that makes your whole system more resilient.
And this one is non-negotiable. Exercise doesn't just give you a temporary mood boost. Research clearly shows it physically increases the density of your dopamine receptors. You are literally building more docking stations for pleasure in your brain. It's one of the most powerful things you can possibly do to rebuild the system from the ground up.
And if you only take one single thing away from this whole explainer, please let it be this. Anhedonia is a state where your feeling and motivation circuits are offline. Waiting around for them to just come back on their own is a losing game. Action. Action is the manual override switch.
So let's bring this all together. We've defined the problem, we've looked at the science, we've gone over the tools. Now let's map out what the path forward, the path to reclaiming your reward system, actually looks like.
I want you to remember these 3 things. First, this is a physiological condition, not personal failing. It is not your fault. Second, be patient with yourself. As we saw with Rachel and David, real, lasting neurochemical change takes time, often 6 months to a year. And finally, action is the spark. Do the thing first and the feeling will follow, not the other way around. So I'm going to leave you with this question. Not what are you going to do tomorrow or next week, today. What is one small 5-minute action you will take to begin this process? It could be listening to one song without any distractions, taking that 30-second cold blast, or just walking around the block once. Remember, you have to act your way out. The size of that first step doesn't matter at all. The act of starting, that is everything.